A little bit further into the message today that I started. Notice, if you will, we're dealing with the thought and the idea about fellowship and falling. Been doing a series of messages on how to keep from falling, and I want to kind of stick with this whole thing if I could right quick. I believe it's something that we need to take a look at. In other words, just as a warning, if you will. The Bible talks about the idea about falling all over the New Testament, if you will. It's also in the Old Testament also. But notice, if you will, it says, "So then every one of us shall give an account of himself to God. And let us not therefore judge one another anymore, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way." So again, we're talking about the thought and the idea about, in other words, how to keep from falling. So if you would appreciate you praying, numbers for today. I'm going to go just a little bit further into this message. Let's go to the Lord in prayer and ask God to bless. Father, we come to you now, Lord, in the precious name of Jesus once again, asking you, Father, right now, Lord, just to speak to, Lord, to my heart, if you will, and I pray, Lord, as you speak to my heart, that you might speak to me and then through me to those of us that will hear today. Lord, I love you today. Thank you. Praise you. Lord, I really believe seriously, Lord, in these last days, that, Lord, that there's going to be a falling away. That's what you told us in 2 Thessalonians in chapter number 2. And I pray, Father, right now that somehow or another that we would learn and we would listen and we would begin to start to, Lord, figure out how it is we can keep ourselves from falling. Not only ourselves, but our families, our friends, and those in our fellowship. If you would, and Lord, help us, Lord, to be able to grow, to know what it is you have us to do. Lord, love you today. Thank you. Praise you. Ask all in the precious name of Jesus for a sacred prayer today. And all of God's people said amen and amen. Quickly, I want to take a look at the introduction that I gave this morning. I want to just kind of touch once again, go a little bit further if I could. And I'm not going to go back through it quite like it is that I did before, kind of preach through it. But let me let you know something right now. The same thing it is that the Apostle Paul dealt with in the first century here in Romans chapter number 14 is the same thing it is we're dealing today, if you will, in the church in 2001. So that means 2,000 years have passed by, if you will. In other words, this message is just as relevant back then as it is today. No getting around that. And the reason is the thought, the idea, him that is weak in the faith, receive you, but not to doubtful disputations. How many of you knows there's all kinds of doubt found in the church in no uncertain terms of what's right, what's wrong, what's acceptable, isn't, what have you all in life. Y'all know that? Say amen. That's still here today. How about the idea about diet? It says, "For one believeth that he may eat all things, another who is weak eateth herbs." That means the idea that dietary laws and dietary restrictions and such what have you along that line are still, in other words, plaguing the church of the living God today, still as of yet. You take those that are Seventh-day Adventists and what have you, they'll argue all day long about the idea about dietary laws out of the Old Testament, trying to bring them into the New Testament, which the New Testament is so clear about the idea that everything, that, in other words, that is prayed over is acceptable. I don't know how in the world I really can't see that, but that's what the Bible says. If you know that, say amen. Even the idea about an illustration of, in other words, about Peter, in other words, that sheep being let down, if you will, with all kinds of unclean animals, and the Lord making the statement to him, "Arise, kill, and eat." And so we got that through and throughout, but still, 2,000 years later, we're still, in other words, arguing over the idea about dietary laws. If that's true, say amen. No getting around that. 2,000, I'm just trying to tell you, it ain't changed none. How about the idea about the verse? And I think personally, if you'll read the context of all of what Paul deals with, he actually is dealing with the idea about meat sacrifice to idols. You say, well, that certainly, in other words, is not around today. Yes, it is. Right now, in other words, you realize the Muslims that are bringing in, if you will, the meats and what have you, even in Costco, you can get chicken, my friend, that's been blessed, if you will, by the Inman or Einman or whatever they are. In other words, the idea to Allah. Matter of fact, in other words, the catering trucks that they have, in other words, there's where it is, their meats and what have you are under a thing called halal. Yeah, halal. So don't think that's, in other words, not still true today. It most assuredly is. And then you take the Jewish, in other words, what do you call that? Kosher and what have you. That also. So it's still here today. So you can see that, say amen. You're gone. How about the idea about the days? And how many here know, in other words, still people, in other words, are arguing about, in other words, the day that we ought to worship on? 2,000 years later, whether it's supposed to be Saturday or whether it's supposed to be Sunday. Still an argument there as far as that goes. But clearly, in other words, the church settled, if you will, and this is the verse it is that I use, one man esteemeth one day above another, another esteemeth every day alike. Some people say, what difference does it make? In other words, the idea, I worship God every day, so there ain't no use in going to church, in other words, on a Saturday or Sunday, jumping on that line. And then they argue about, in other words, whether we're still supposed to be observing, in other words, the Sabbath today. Well, it's really pretty easy. It says, let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. The Apostle Paul wrote that, if you will, in the first century. Inside the first century and inside the second century, inside of it, I said, there's where it is, the whole church as a whole decided on the idea that the Lord, if you will, wanted us meeting upon the first day of the week. And that's exactly what, in other words, not only seemingly, in other words, was threatened in the Old Testament, seemingly practiced in the New Testament, yea, if you will, for a matter of fact, in other words, is historically nailed down in no uncertain terms. All the early church writers, in other words, go along with that, in other words, in the first century and also in the second century also. So I'm just trying to show you, but still today, 2,000 years later, we're still arguing over the idea about days. And it's causing people to stumble left and right. You say, well, what's the big problem? The big problem, those it is, in other words, come up with this Sabbath situation, turn around, doesn't believe in hell. They believe, in other words, in the idea about Ellen G. White, in other words, being a prophetess, if you will, and all kinds of problems, if you will, as a cult, in other words, and there's where it is. That's where the problem is. But nonetheless, though, we still are taking a look at the idea of, in other words, this stumbling block situation. Then the idea is about drink. Hey, how many here know 2,000 years later, the church still can't get their act together? Still, when the idea, my friend, there's where it is that drunkenness runs rampant, if you will, in cults and isms and false religions and stuff like that, my friend. And yea, if you will, eating up the church of the living God today. I don't know about you, but you listen to me very carefully. I thought about this here just the other day. Do you know how many times it is, in other words, we've sat there in the gospel we preach, have turned around and set people free, my friend, from drunkenness in this church? If you know that, say amen. Then they turn around, in other words, and leave this church and go to another church. And there's where it is, social drinking, as far as that goes, is acceptable. It's not that big of a deal and what have you. Next thing you know is we get them back, in other words, they're drunks again. Come on. Now, that ain't been that long ago, but in other words, there's where it is. That's exactly what has happened. But then okay, I'm just letting you know this is how it is, folks. I guarantee you we're seeing these people go right back into the same, if you will, bondage that we sat there, in other words, and got them out of with the gospel it is that we preach. And so here's where it is. It's good neither to eat flesh nor to drink wine nor anything whereby thy brother stumbleth or is offended or is made, what does it say, weak. So let me go on. 2,000 years later. And the same message back then is still here today to be preached, if you will, and to be practiced. Then the destruction. There's where it is. It talks about, if thy brother be grieved with thy meat, now walkest thou not charitably. Destroy not him with thy meat for whom Christ died. I mean, no people, my friend, are being destroyed by the stumbling blocks and offenses, my friend, that comes to these weak believers, in other words, and draws them away, in other words, causes them to backslide and such and what have you along that line. That's why it's important, my friend, I guarantee you in no uncertain terms, to have strict convictions, standards, and practices. If you'll do that, that's true love. Right. Even Christ, in other words, pleased not himself. Right. Is what, in other words, Romans chapter 15, which in other words we're not going to get to in this setting as far as it goes. But even Christ pleased not himself. And so that's the idea. When somebody wants to talk about the idea of strictness or anything else on that line, bro, that's the true love. Not this loose liberalism as far as that goes. Matter of fact, that's why they're not walking charitably. Those it is, my friend, they're going to have their way in what they think, in other words, is a liberty. Then the idea about damnation. And you realize the idea, most people don't believe that once you're saved, you can go to hell if you wanted to. Well, come on. But the idea, he that doubteth is damned if he eat, because he eateth not of faith, for whatsoever is not of faith, that's sin. So I just thought, in other words, we just kind of nail this thing down. Let me go a little bit further with this thing. I don't want to spend all that much time, in other words, in the introduction. The doctrine, I'm not going to deal with that as far as that goes. That's just Romans 16, just a couple of chapters over. Talk about, in other words, avoid those that are causing divisions and offenses. That's what, in other words, we've been reading about as far as that goes. Now, the fellowship of the seducers, that's what I dealt with today. And we dealt with the idea about, in other words, and I know it's kind of crazy, in the sense of the idea that, in other words, whether it is that you've got a family member, my friend, that has decided that they're going to go go after some other god, well, how it is, in other words, we ought to treat that situation. I don't believe we ought to kill them by no stretch of the imagination. That's not where it is that we're at. But how many of you know the idea, if we're not careful, we're going to turn right around, if you will, and we're going to end up condoning the situation. If, in other words, we don't make a stand, take a stand, in other words, immediately, in other words, get away from that nonsense and what have you along that line, because that's what will happen. Now, let me go on. Then the idea about, that which provoked the judgment that there was for the refusal of the Israelites to go into Canaan. The provocation stated in this text can be divided into 3 parts. Now, here's what happened. Whenever they came back, here's what it is that they said. They said, in other words, you know what? We've sat there and we've seen the idea that there's walled cities. Since there's walled cities, we can't overcome these individuals. Not only is there walled cities, in other words, but the idea there's giants also in the land. And from the giants and what have you, and the walled cities and what have you, he said there's just no way in the world. Sure, there's no getting around the thought and the idea of, in other words, that the land is flowing with milk and honey, just like the Lord said. There's no getting around that. But immediately, there's where it is. The problem is the idea. 10 of those spies out of the 12 said, it can't be done. Now, you say, well, what are you trying to parallel here? I'm trying to parallel the idea that, in other words, whenever you've got, in other words, individuals, and by the way, you realize, in other words, these 10 spies, the total of 12, were, in other words, in leadership positions. Yeah. 10 came back and made the clear-cut statement, we can't do this. We can't do it. Ain't going to happen. Just simply, in other words, we just might as well forget this. I don't care what God said or anything else on that line. This ain't going to happen. So you do realize immediately, there's where it is that Joshua and Caleb jumped up and immediately sat there and said, oh yes, we can. We need to jump up right now. And in other words, we can eat these people's lunch. I don't care if they're giants or not. Come on now, y'all remember that? Yeah. So here's what the problem is. Now watch this, and this is what you've got to grab a hold of. And you say, well, where's the application for this church right now? Well, the application for this church just simply goes like this. If we're not careful, and I got to talk, I guess, to the leadership or those that are older as far as that goes. You realize, in other words, we need to set an example of the idea that we can do exactly what it is that God said we can do. It's the idea, my friend, that we can be victorious. We can be more than conquerors through Him which loved us. We can be overcomers. There's no getting around that. Come on, somebody. We can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. Come on. You see what we're saying? If we're not careful, we're going to send the wrong message, if you will, to God. We're going to send the wrong message, if you will, to our young people, where it is, it's the idea, in other words, this cannot be done. And this is the idea about being a stumbling block. In other words, our young people and the people that are growing up in this church need to know the idea, my friend, yes, we can be victorious. Yes, we can go into the promised land, if you will, the land of victory. There's just simply no getting around that. And by the way, if you don't think the young people of this church are not looking to, if you will, the leadership of this church, to sit there and set an example, my friend, to go forth, in other words, in victory, you're sadly mistaken. They're certainly looking upon this situation. Now, let me go just a little bit further, if I may, right quick. There's the idea, the disbelief, if you will, in this provocation. In verse number 11, it says, and the Lord said unto Moses, how long will this people provoke me? And I say that in an application today of the idea of two how longs. One is disbelief. It's the thought and the idea that there's, well, I don't know, times are changing and what have you, and I'm just not really sure, in other words, whether it is this church can go or it can grow or it can do what it is, in other words, it's trying to do. Trying to reach out to those that are lost and undone without God, trying to meet the needs, if you will, for the homeless, the hungry, and those that are hurting. And if you're not careful, there's where it is, my friend, we can send the wrong message. And we can end up being a stumbling block to those, it is, my friend, that are younger in this church, if you will. Send the wrong message, I don't know about you, even to the God Himself. He's asking the question, if the Lord said unto Moses, how long will this people do what now? Provoke me. And you say, well, Well, yeah, let me go a little bit further with this whole thing. The outline that is that I developed, I didn't develop, that I got today, in other words, I really didn't like it after I got through with it. The duration and how long, verse 11, still two how longs. The duration and how long will it be ere they how long will it be ere they believe me? How long are they, in other words, not going to believe the idea of what it is that I said? And how many knows the verse? The Bible is clear, my friend, about how victorious the verse Christians can be. If you all know that, say amen. If you don't, you ought to start underlining your Bible as you're reading it. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. We're more than conquerors through him which loved us. The idea about he that overcometh, he that overcometh. How many here knows in the book of Revelation chapter 2 and chapter 3, my friend, he that overcometh is again and again and again. If I'm not mistaken, I think in the book of Revelation there are seven time overcomer. Maybe more than that, but it seems like I focused, in other words, one time on the idea about overcoming. The idea about overcoming, my friend, regardless of what comes after us, we, my friend, can overcome this situation. We can push down our enemies. Come on, somebody ought to say, matter of fact, we've been given all power over all the power of the enemy, and nothing by any means shall hurt them, is exactly what the Lord in the verse told his disciples. Somebody ought to say amen. That's the duration in this provocation. I don't know about you, but this church needs to make sure it doesn't provoke God, if you will, on the thought and the idea that, in other words, we can't do no more than what it is we're doing right now, just walking around. Notice the defenselessness for this provocation. For all the signs which I have showed among them. What more do these Israelites want? How about the thought and the idea that, in other words, whenever it is that the gods of Egypt were, in other words, challenged, if you will, by God, and all those plagues it is that came about, my friend, was actually a rebuke to every god that there was, that the Egyptians had. And there's where it is whenever they brought forth the lice, what have you on that line, the frogs. They did also, but they couldn't get rid of the frogs. It's interesting, in other words, what the world can do, what the devil can do. He can bring forth a lot of problems, he just can't get rid of none of them. Now, how many here knows those 10 plagues, you nail this thing down, was just a sign, if you will, of God showing, in other words, his power. And then the idea about, in other words, the miracles, him parting the Red Sea. Come on. Him, in other words, bringing water out of a rock. Him floating down that manna every single day of the week. Come on, somebody ought to say amen. How about the idea of all the signs which I've showed among them? Why in the world they doubting the idea, in other words, that I can't help them get into a land of victory that I want to so desperately give them? How long? The defenselessness for this attitude. I can go to this church right quick and it wouldn't take me long to sit there and see the great things it is that God's done in this church. Right. It's brought us, if you will, from a little thing over there, in other words, off of F Street. Then over there, the idea about the Veterans Hall brought us into this complex, if you will, this facility. We're now debt-free as far as that goes. Got $120-some-odd thousand in the bank, if you will. Come on. Debt-free, if you will, as far as that goes. Come on. The idea that, in other words, we've turned around, we've started churches. We put preachers out, in other words, out of this church again and again and again. Come on. We turned around and had 156 people in a prayer meeting, in other words, one night. Had 179 people out on visitation in 1 week as far as that goes. Turned around and had 436 people here at this facility. A total of 571, if you will, on one Sunday from, in other words, our satellite ministries as far as that goes. And now you just think to yourself, how many knows, my friend, what God did back then, he can still do today? My Bible tells me he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. I got to go back to the idea, my friend. I don't know about you, and this is why I got through, in other words, Wednesday night, talking about the former and the latter rain. I don't know about you, but I want to see God, my friend, bring one more rain, if you will, in other words, to this ministry, and let him do something good and great as far as that goes. The defenselessness of us sitting here, if you will, with these empty pews, thinking to ourselves, God can't do this any longer. That's not the truth. Not by no stretch of the imagination. And all I want to do is challenge, if you will, the leadership or the older folks that have been around for a while. Please, please don't be a stumbling block to those, my friend, right now, that, in other words, were so desperately looking, if you will, to the idea that this thing can go, this thing can grow, and this thing can do exactly what it is that needs to be done. That's what's desperately needed tonight. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be a stumbling block. to the young people, if you will. I don't want to sit there, others, and come back with an evil report, if you will. A report, the idea there's too many giants out there. Hey, we act like, in other words, we have whooped giants before. We most assuredly have. There's the giant of debt, the giant of drugs, the giant of drunkenness and what have you. The diet. I think that's the Lord telling you, you need to be on a diet. Really, I think it's, of course, I'm preaching to you guys. Got to get out of it somehow or another. We're defenseless in the idea, my friend. This is not what God wants for our church. By no stretch of the imagination. The defenselessness for this provocation. The plan, if you will, for these stumbling blocks was, the initial plan of retribution was threefold, if you will. One, and I don't know about you, but in other words, we don't need no dis-ease in this church. The Bible says, I'll smite them with pestilence. And by the way, you know who he's talking about there? He's talking about those 10 individuals that became stumbling blocks. That's who he's talking about there. He's talking about the idea that, in other words, there's where it is, them coming back with this evil report as far as that goes. It stopped, if you will, in other words, that whole situation going and growing. Now, I need to come to a point here just in a minute. The disease. I'll see if I can find a better place to. Don't let me forget to talk to you about the number. The 10 and how many they affected. Don't let me forget that. Wave at me if I get, in other words, lost in this thing. The disinheritance, he says, in other words, not only am I going to smite them with the pestilence, I'm going to disinherit them. It's the idea. There's no telling, my friend, what it is that God wanted for this church. Or excuse me, not wanted, wants for this church. Wanted, I don't think he's changed his plan. So I can say wanted or wants for this church. I'm not trying to cut it off or shut it off right now. There's no telling what it is he wants. There's no telling what it is he wants to do with this church. And us as individuals as far as that goes. I don't know about you, but I don't think God is through by no stretch of the imagination. You say, how do I know that? Because when we came back from camp, I had some young people, my friend, come to me and make the statement. They're talking about the idea about them wanting to preach. While I was up there at camp, I had one of our little fellas come up to me and sit there and said, he bopped up and looked at me and said, I want to preach. And I said, well, when? Tonight? Or tomorrow night? And what have you? Want to take Brother Crow or Brother Curtis's place? And he looked at me like, yeah. I don't know about you, but I appreciate that kind of a attitude. Pushing them big old boys out of the way. Just push them out of the way. I got a message from the Lord. Hallelujah. I got to, come on, somebody ought to say amen. And then me standing right over here, if you will, here just the other day, somebody in other words making a statement about, in other words, wanting to preach and how to outline and such and what have you on that line. I don't know about you, but you know what that was? That was a breath, if you will, of fresh air blowing through this church once again, my friend. It's not like it hadn't happened before. Come on. Come on. He said, I'll disinherit them. That's the thread, if you will, in other words, that he's going to make good on as far as that goes. But I don't know about you, but I just hope that that's not where it is we're at. I don't believe so. And the reason is the idea, I can see, my friend, some things beginning to start to happen. I really can. No getting around that. We've seen, my friend, this altar here filled with people, my friend, that have never been to an altar necessarily before. In other words, getting saved, getting their heart right with the Lord and such and what have you on that line. If that's good, say amen. How about the displacement, if you will? I will make of thee a greater nation and mightier than they. This is where it is that God sitting there saying, Moses, you're faithful. Moses, I'll tell you what, I'll kill every stinking one of these individuals and I'll raise up a nation out of your loins right now. Now there's a section here that I didn't outline and what have you, and you'll probably see a gap. It's the idea about Moses praying, no. Him praying the idea, no. I don't want to do this thing by myself. No. Would you, in other words, would you allow another course? And there the answer, in other words, is what it is that I'm going to finish preaching right now. Here's the answer of the idea. Well, the punishment for these stumbling blocks went like this. First of all, the cause for this punishment was the idea, was a character of their sin. He says, and have not hearkened to my voice. Hey, when God sits there and says, in other words, the idea of, in other words, you can go forth and you can be victorious and what have you. How many here know we need to listen to him? If you know that, say amen. If he can tell you you can whoop a giant, guess what? You can whoop a giant. You do realize that giants pose no problems to them. As a matter of fact, there's where it is that Joshua and Caleb sat there and said, Caleb says, I want that mountain. And that mountain was full of giants, and that's okay with me. I'm 80 some odd years old. I can give you something to do is whoop them. And by the way, how many here knows, my friend, when it comes to God and when it comes to God's people, he can sit there and take a little teenage boy by the name of David and whoop the biggest boy that there happens to be around there by the name of Goliath. He can do that, my friend, back there in the verse of the book of Numbers, and he can turn around and do it, my friend, in the book of 1 Samuel chapter number 17. Somebody ought to say amen. And by the way, you nail this thing down. David, my friend, had 5 smooth stones. He's going to whoop Goliath with one of them, and the other 4, my friend, he's going to go after his brothers as far as that goes also. And you nail this thing down. When the time came, my friend, David, my friend, even old, was ready to go get himself some more giants. That'd be okay, because the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Somebody ought to say amen. Giants have been no problems. Giants have never been no problem. You guys have Googled junk and what have you. There was a boxer by the name of Primo Carnera. You remember him? He was Argentinian. This dude was so big, it shows a picture of him standing like that. And if I'm not mistaken, 2 almost 6 foot tall guys actually had their head underneath his armpits. Anybody ever seen that picture? You have, raised your hand. Okay, there you go. Brother, what's your name? Oh, Brother Juan. Brother Juan. Brother Juan, he's seen that picture. Primo Carnera. And he was a boxer. You know what's interesting? Keep looking at the videos. You ought to see the little guy that whooped him. I'm not sure who it was, but that'd be something for you guys that do stuff like that. Come on. You can't help doing stuff like that, really. They have this is the character, the continuation of the evil, and have tempted me now these 10 times. I mean, no, God's counting. Look at your neighbor and say, God's counting. He said, how long shall I bear with this evil congregation? This troubling congregation. This congregation that just seems like, in other words, that they cannot get their act together. And they're listing, if you will, my friend, the stumbling blocks and seducers, if you will, to get them off a track, of other words, of what it is that they ought to be doing. Then we go a little bit further. The compounding of their evil, it says, because of all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles, which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness. Now, this is where it is that I was talking about the other things. Now, this is where I'll give you the number. Hey, listen to me now. How many guys went out in the verse to spy out the land? 12. How many came back with an evil report? 10. How many people did this affect? Anywhere from 1.5 million to 3.5 million individuals. As a matter of fact, there was one figure that probably, in other words, would match up exactly. There was over 600 and some odd thousand men, it said. How about the idea of 10 men that, in other words, that had decided, in other words, to be seducers and stumbling blocks, if you will, ended up, my friend, taking out 600,000 men. Yeah. See, somewhere along the line, we've got this all whacked out. We don't realize the idea how little bit of leaven it takes to leaven the whole lump. There's a possibility, and I've heard these statistics, that it went to 1.5 million Jews, if you will. If you just kind of double 650 some odd thousand, what have you. But you got to have it with the women. That'd be the double. You realize they had no birth control. They had kids like crazy. There's where the 3.5 million come in at, of the figures. But nonetheless, though, let me show you what ends up happening. He says the crowd for this punishment, God specified exactly who would be punished, first of all. He said this included, he said, your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness, and all that were numbered of you, according to your whole number from 20 years old upward, it says, which have murmured against probably me, I would imagine. Okay. We're not taking away, we're just cutting it off. have murmured against. Now, this is who it included. Now let me give you the positive end of this thing. You guys need a little something positive. You do say amen. Desperately, quickly. This is who's included. The all that were numbered of you. Then have the idea who's excluded, in other words, from this situation, if you will, in other words, this punishment. It's the idea, doubtless ye shall not come into the land, talking about those we just talked about, concerning as I swear to make you dwell in, save Caleb, it says, the son of Jephunneh. He says, and Joshua, the son of Nun. But notice this, if you will, this is good. But your little ones, which you have said should be a prey. As a matter of fact, that's what they complain. If we're not careful, we're going to lose our children. If, in other words, if we try to go forth and be victorious, we're going to lose our children. Hey, how many here knows, folks? That's not how you lose your children going forth. That's how you gain them. That's how you keep them. That's how you gain them. That's how you get them back. Right. You still go forward. He said, in other words, and they shall know. He says, and they shall know the land which ye have despised. Okay, there seems like there's just stuff. Those little ones, okay, which you said, yeah, there it is. Which he said, your little ones which ye have said should be a prey, them will I bring in. Hey, how many here knows the idea they need to be brought in? Yeah. Come on. So I don't know about you, whenever you got the verse, 10 men have turned around the verse and caused the possibility of tens of thousands of people, my friend, to turn around and backslide and to be made weak. Come on. That have turned away from this situation. How many here can see the verse what it is we're talking about? How it don't take much. It really doesn't. 10 men, the verse turns around the verse the whole nation of Israel and causes them, if you will, the verse down to the next thing. The character of this punishment, about 5 words and things are said about this punishment. One, first of all, the reciprocation. That means the idea how this thing turns around and comes back around. It says, and say unto them, truly as I live, saith the Lord, as ye have spoken in mine ears, so will I do unto you. You say, well, what did they say? They made the statement, would God we have died in the wilderness. Yeah, right. You guys remember that? Yeah. Well, guess what? You said it. You got it. Yeah. How many knows you need to be careful what you pray? Right. I said you need to be careful what you say. How many here are glad that God didn't answer every one of your prayers? If you are, say amen. I don't know about you, but I most assuredly am. What happened? Did I? Thank you. Appreciate that. It's one from Will. The refusal. Surely they shall not see the land which I swear to their fathers, neither shall any of them that provoke me see it. I mean, this is the thing to do. This griping and complaining, moaning and groaning and what have you, that's not the thing to do. If you read the Old Testament, all those murmurs and what have you, it didn't go well for them folks. Has anybody ever read that before in the Old Testament? If you have, say amen. Amen. Just checking. Why do you think it's going to be any different now? Right. So how about the idea about the rerouting? I don't know about you, but my GPS, every once in a while, in other words, it just may happen to take a wrong turn. Yeah, it could happen. And all of a sudden I look down there and well, guess what it says? Rerouting. Recalculating. Rerouting. Since you don't know where you're going, since you're not going to trust, in other words, from up above, satellite. So you guys, who do you think I was talking about? Okay. He said, tomorrow, he said, turn you, and get you into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. And how many knows, my friend, this is where this thing's turning into the idea of wandering in the wilderness. Now, I'm not going to spend that much more time on this thing. This rerouting, how many here knows that's not what this church needs. We don't need to be wandering in the wilderness of Wasco. We don't. We need, my friend, to get on the idea. In other words, and by the way, those walled cities, it is, in other words, you do realize the first city that, in other words, that they went after, Jericho, what happened to all those walled cities? They came a-tumbling down. They fell flat, didn't they? See, all that complaint about them walled cities, it was just almost like the Lord said, now let me show you about what your daddy sat there and said, or what your granddaddy said about the walled cities. Boom! There it is. That's what it is that I'd have done to every one of them. And those giants and what have you, they fell left and right. As a matter of fact, one old geezer by the name of Caleb decided what he's going to do is, I want to make a project out of them. I want that mountain. How about, then your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years. I don't know, by the way, you're not going to go by yourself. You're going to take your family right along with them. And do you really think that's going to be a good thing, in other words, to take them, in other words, on this little trek or this little trip? I don't think so. Nobody knows. He says, and they shall wander in the wilderness 40 years and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. How about the ruin? Your carcasses shall fall. And by the way, how to keep from falling? When God says, in other words, you can do it, guess what? You can do it. Just go find out how, not if. He says, your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness, and all that were numbered of you according to your whole number. I mean, you know, that's heartbreaking. From 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me. The reprisal, he said, even those men that did bring up, in other words, that evil report, this is the 10, upon the land, died by the plague before the Lord. Immediately, in other words, there's where it is. In other words, it happened immediately, in other words, to them right then, right there. How about the cry? This is, I'm just going to end it up right quick. He says, and Moses told these things to all the children of Israel, and the people mourned, was to say, greatly. I don't know about you, but I'm fixing to come to a conclusion here tonight. No, hang on. Don't change it until I get there. The conclusion, notice if you will in verse number 38. But Joshua, the son of Nun, Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, which were of the men that went to search the land, what does it say? Lived. Got a question to ask you. Whose report are you going to believe? I'm going to believe the report of the Lord. Whose report are you going to receive? I'm going to receive the report of the Lord. If He wants us to go forth in victory, we can. If in other words, if we stay back, we sit back, and we settle in, my friend, that's going to send a message to God. It's going to send a message, if you will, my friend, to our families and what have you. And there's where it is. We're going to start our little trek, our little walk in the wilderness of Wasco. Let's bow our heads.